Hello, my name is Martin, and this is a course about Python sleep, how to add time delays to your code. Let's start this off with a little story. So you're outside, it's a beautiful night, you're lying under the stars and just looking up into the sky, dreaming your thoughts, when suddenly there's this one thought that pops into your mind. Is my website down? And you just can't get it out of your head anymore. Is my website down? Is my website down? And you start to get more and more anxious. And in this moment, you decide that you never want this to happen again. And so you're going to build a little Uptime bot that is going to help you check the status of your website and just notify you if there's anything wrong with it. So you can build this little Uptime bot, and Python is very helpful and eager and checks for you. And it just keeps checking and checking. But sometimes it gets a little too eager and it just checks too often. There's too little time in between the different checks. And so what you need to do and what you're going to learn about in this course is to help Python take breaks in between and just relax a little and do these requests just as often as is necessary so that you can rest assured that you know whether your website is up or down. For this, you're going to use the time module that is part of the standard library. And specifically, you're going to work with the sleep function. So you're going to be using time.sleep in Python. Let's take a quick look at the table of contents. You will start off by learning how to use time.sleep. Then you're going to build the Uptime bot, so a little script that can check for the status of your website. And then you're going to learn about some next steps on how you can improve this bot to, for example, send emails or to deploy it on the web. And I'm going to tell you some resources on Real Python that you can use to keep building on this bot project. And because it's a project about helping your code relax, you're also going to get some chances to relax yourself. And if your code is going to take a break, you're also going to be able to take a break. So just relax a bit and enjoy. And I hope you're going to have a nice time going through this course and learn something. And let's get started by seeing the Uptime bot in action. Over here in my command line, I will start the Uptime bot just so you see what you're going to build at the end of this. You see, when I run this bot, then it pings a website, tells me which URL it is pinging, and it tells me it's up. Then the code takes a little break and calls again to the URL and sees it's still up and just keeps going like this. I'm going to stop this. And this is what you're going to build by the end of this course. So next up, let's learn about Python's time.sleep. In this lesson, you'll get to know the basic functionality of Python's time.sleep. Time.sleep is a function that you can use to instruct your code to take a break, and it comes in the time module that is included in the standard library of Python, but you will need to import it for your script in order to use it. And then it goes by calling the module, dot the function name, sleep, and then pass it as an argument the amount of seconds that you want it to sleep. And then what Python is going to do is going to take a break for the specified amount of seconds. Let's go over to the terminal and look at time.sleep in action. So I'm going to start the Python interpreter, and then I will import the time module. And then you can say time.sleep and pass it an amount of seconds. Now, when I press enter, you'll see that it's going to take 3 seconds before those 3 little prompts here are going to come back. And in that time, your Python code is sleeping and you can't do anything. And here the prompts are back. So that took 3 seconds. Let's look at it again. Or I'm going to show you if I put in 1 here, the time is shorter. If I put in 3 again, you get a bit more time to relax. And here it is, the prompt is back. So in the meantime, while Python is sleeping, you can't do anything. But once the sleep is over, Python is going to continue executing whatever other parts you're going to have inside of your script. So you might be wondering, where there's really 3 seconds? And I didn't really even try to count it because I'm not that great at counting seconds. But we can, of course, use a little test to figure out whether those were really 3 seconds. So in the next lesson, you're going to take a terminal test to figure out whether time.sleep actually works as promised. In the previous lesson, you ran time.sleep, but you were wondering, were those actually 3 seconds? You decided it's time for a test. So you can run a test directly from the Python terminal with the timeit module. So you're going to call Python with the module timeit and then pass it a number of times that you want to loop over the code that you're specifying. And then you give it a piece of code. And Python is going to measure the execution time for this and give you some helpful output. So let's hop over to the terminal and then run this code. So I'm going to say Python -module timeit. I'm going to say 3 times. And then I will pass the code that is import time.sleep 3. So this is exactly the same code that you used before. And now, after you press enter with this, you might expect it to take, 9 seconds? Let's see what's actually going to happen. And don't get nervous when those 9 seconds pass without your code finishing. Let's just give it time. I assure you, what's happening is what's supposed to happen. And this is one of those moments where your code is sleeping, so you could just relax a bit yourself. Maybe take a deep breath. Is there nice weather where you are right now? Maybe dream a little about what you might be doing after watching this video course. Well, you get some good suggestions of what you can do next. For now, just keep staring blankly at the screen until you get some output from Python, and here it is. Okay, so this took way longer than 3 times 3 seconds, right? You might have expected it to take 9 seconds, but it didn't. Let's see why this happened and what this output tells you. So you ran the timeit module and you passed it an argument of 3 loops. So this 3 loops output that you're seeing here is related to the number that you passed in here. Then you have the code, and the code, you know that it's supposed to take 3 seconds. So we see this 3 seconds per loop relates to the argument in here. But then here's another piece, and this is the solution to the riddle of why it took so much longer. The timeit module actually runs your piece of code not just n times, but it also gets the output of the best of 5 runs. So instead of, let's do a quick calculation, instead of doing 3 loops times 3 seconds, so it does that, but then it also does it 5 times, which comes to an amount of 45 seconds, which is approximately the time that you just got to take a break for. All right, so we see that the time.sleep function actually works as expected. You're passing in 3 seconds, and the execution time also takes 3 seconds. Now, using this n that you saw is actually really important that you specified to use 3, because the default n is actually 1,000,000. So if you wouldn't pass 3 as you did in here, then Python would run 1,000,000 loops for this code, which would give you a nice time to relax, yes, but that might actually be too long, because that means you could sleep for approximately half a year. All right, so after you timed time.sleep with timeit, it's now time to move on and build your Uptime Bot. In this lesson, you're going to build an Uptime Bot. And eventually it's going to look something like this, but don't get too stuck with this code. You're going to build it step by step, starting now. So head over to your favorite text editor. I'm here in VS Code, and I'm still on the terminal in an empty folder, and I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to say touch uptimebot.py. So now you can see I have this empty file uptimebot. Open it up, and I will also get rid of all this extra stuff. Okay, you are inside of a file called uptimebot.py. And what I usually like to do, and what I suggest you to do when you start coding up a script, is to just take quick comments of what you want to achieve in here. So you're going to want to have some sort of loop that queries a URL. You're going to want to catch an exception if it happens. You're going to want your code to take breaks. And that sounds about right. So these are 3 tasks that you want the script to accomplish. Let's get started right away. For querying a URL, you're going to use the urllib package, and specifically you need urllib.request. And this allows you to make requests, and it's also part of the standard library, so you won't need to install anything else. Okay, so you can query a URL by saying urllib.request.urlopen, and then pass in a URL. Now, you could hardcode a URL in here, but I'm going to put it into a variable that, of course, you're going to need to define as well. So let's say the URL that you want to query is the Python docs.python.org. And then we go to 3, of course. All right, so that's the URL that you want to query. Now, feel free to put in your own URL here instead. Now with this, I can send a HTTP query to the URL. And then if there is no exception, then everything is fine, right? But now you want to also make sure that you know if there is an exception and catch it. So we'll wrap this into a try except block. Try doing this request. And if there's an exception, then we want to catch this exception. Now, maybe we want to say if this try works out, I'm going to print out that everything is fine. Let's say this is success. And then if it's not fine, I'm going to print out error. Okay, like this, we're catching an exception and then have a loop that queries the URL. Okay, we're querying the URL so far, but now you want to also add a loop. And for this, you're going to just use a while true loop and then move all of this functionality into the body of the loop. So now you have a loop that queries the URL and it tries to make this request to the URL, print success if it works out. And if it runs into an error, then it's going to instead print error. Now, if you run this as is right now, then this while true is going to make the problem of just keeps calling way too often and way too quickly. So this is where time.sleep comes in. So you want to say at the end of one of these try except execution runs, you want to say time.sleep, let Python rest for 3 seconds. Now you see my editor already tells me that I'm missing time because I haven't imported it yet. So you can go up here and say import time. Now everyone is happy and Python is going to run into an infinite loop and keep trying to request the URL, print success if it finds it and if there's no error, and print error if there's an error. And we're slipping between calls, so I can get rid of this too. All right, let's give it a quick try. So when I now say Python Uptime Bot and run it, okay, success, 3 seconds of sleep, and another success, 3 seconds of sleep, and another success. So this is working as expected. Now let's quickly check what happens if it runs into an error. So I'm just going to add something to this URL to create a URL that doesn't exist, and then run the bot again. Okay, so instead it's running into an error. It prints out error, waits for 3 seconds, prints out error again, etc. So it looks like this is working as expected. Now in the next lesson, you're going to refactor this code a little bit, add some more interesting print statements, and move it into a function.